Alrighty fam, welcome back. Let's do it. Let's talk demonic beasts here. It seems to be the content you guys love the most, and I am working on a Skull and Hardy ultimate guide, so please bear with me. I want to make sure that I can bring you guys the right content around this. I don't want to just rush it. I want to make sure that it is inclusive and wholesome like my other one. I think I'll have a couple of like Skull and Hardy videos coming out before then anyway, but yeah, I want to make sure it's proper. So today what I really wanted to talk about was what demonic beast is the most bang for your buck, right? Like what one is going to be the most beneficial for you to either one, invest in heroes, and two, like, so basically whose holy relics are the best, and then also alongside that like weighing out how hard it is and like which one to maybe go after first. Right now, this may not be an overly surprising video. Like for example, I mean, we can guess where the new snake hangs out in this list, but it might be at least maybe a little bit eye-opening maybe. So basically what we're going to talk about is each boss and its kind of level of difficulty, and then obviously cover the holy relics, and in the end that we'll talk about like maybe which one I recommend to be the one that you should, you know, either farm or do the most or do the earliest on, right? So let's get stuck in. So first things first, first thing we have to kind of take into consideration is all these heroes that have come out in the game, right? So you have to forgive me, my box is a little bit all over the place due to me mucking around with different heroes. But first things first, let me just give that back because I'm just using Twigo for something. And then I think we do the same thing here. We'll just give Liz back her gear from Red Liz. All right, so the new heroes that have really shaken this up, I would definitely say, is obviously the ultimate, the one Escanor, right? This is the main guy that's just made PvE a lot easier. And obviously, like, I've done a video on it, whether I think Purgatory Melee or Trader Melee is better. I think Trader Melee made a lot of difference to the PvE meta as well. So when I'm talking about these heroes, I'm going to, unfortunately, kind of presume that you have these two, just because it does make the game a lot easier. I'll cover off if you guys don't have those heroes and how hard it makes it and why it makes it harder or easier. And then we'll go from there, right? So I'm kind of gonna, I'll touch on both, but I'm gonna presume you kind of have a few festival units and you're a decent chunk of the way through the game, and like, you know, you don't have to have 5 mil, 10 mil, you know, 2 mil box CC, but I'm kind of going to be going off the fact that you've got a few heroes decently built up to at least level 90, super awakened, and you've got some UR gear for them, right? So let's jump into the heroes, like the units, right? And I was going to do this while going through a clear of one of them, but as we all know by now, I can't multitask to save my life, and this is going to be a bit of a ramble like this. I don't really have a clear kind of goal of what I'm trying to tell you guys. Like, I just want to let you guys know my thoughts and what I recommend for you guys. Maybe you're just starting to get into demonic beasts, maybe you're trying to figure out what team you want to build for them or whose holy relics are worth it the most. So first things first, the bird, right? Now, again, if you've got, this was me mucking around with something else, ignore this. So if you do have, I can't remember, if you do have the one Escanor, right, ultimate, this does make this boss a heck of a lot easier, right? It does make the bird a lot easier. And the reason why is it's because you don't have to have a taunt unit of some sort. You don't have to use Deanne. You don't have to use whether my Matrona is my Matrona, right? You can basically just, on this second floor, phase 2, where you need a taunt, otherwise you get one shot, you can just death damage your way through it. Same thing if you have, wherever he's gone, Freya, or you have a highly duped the one, you can just bully your way through that part, right? So he really did make a change. My flux is just kicked back in. So he really did make a change, right, in terms of how this boss is handled. So there's still obviously some specific heroes you need. You're right, you still need to level up wherever she is, Gelda. But you can kind of get away with having, you know, the one ultimate and then Trader Melee in your team, and then some sort of buffer hero, right? So when I say buffer hero, I mean, I've done a guide on this, right? So you can use Festival, wherever he is, Festival Gotha, right? You can use, standard green New King Arthur. You can even, I've done it even with Brunhild as well. I've done it with Freya as well. So if you do have these two teams, these two heroes built up, which if you've got these two, you probably should, because they're in the top 5 best units in the game. The bird becomes a lot simpler, right? Because you can just kind of brute force your way through it. In terms of Magelda's Holy Relic, it's also very, very clutch. So having a team built around this is a lot easier. Before, what I would have said is it actually becomes a lot more kind of Taylor specific, right? Like, let's say you don't have these two heroes and you have your Brunhild or you have Asariel for your Power Strike, and then you're going to need Matrona as well, right? And then maybe you have the one, maybe you use, like my team setup for this was my, I mean, with besides of Brunhild being Trader Melly, this was my initial setup for this team, right? So, like, these are good, like, general units to have for PvE, but these two are very hyper specific, right? Obviously, Magelda's built for the bird, and Matrona's pretty much built for the bird as well, right? So these two are really hyper specific to this piece of content. I don't use these guys outside of this content at all, right? So again, with the ability to bring in Trader Melly and the one ultimate, it's made it so that the heroes you use here are actually a lot more flexible for the rest of your kind of 7 Deadly Sins journey, so to speak. But that was something that was a bit of a negative for the bird. Towards the end, the bird is pretty good. It has like the most annoying passive is the Overcome Crisis at the very end. Again, if you guys want more details on this, go check out I've got quite a few videos on this, including the ultimate guide thing. But yeah, there's the Overcome Crisis thing at the very end, which is the most annoying debuff. So in terms of like doability or like how hard this boss is, it's getting pretty easy now if you have the right heroes invested into, but even then you don't necessarily need to have the quote-unquote right heroes, right? As you can pretty much just brute force your way with the one Escanor. I've done it with Purgatory Melly as well, right? If you've got, I always lose heroes in this, Trader Melly, right? He just allows you to brute force your way through. So this is kind of the team that I usually run, and like most of these heroes minus Magelda, you can use in the rest of the game as well. All right, so that's pretty helpful, and otherwise you do need to have more kind of hyper specific heroes for this boss specifically. In terms of the kind of holy relics themselves, you've got some really good ones in here, like Purgatory Barns. You've also got Arthur's, which is really good, both Arthur's. You have, the Escanor ones are pretty average. They're not really something I'd recommend investing in. Same thing with Gotha's. Like Gotha's is kind of it is what it is. It's okay, and because of how much people use Gotha and how much I use Gotha, like it does get a bit of help, a bit of use, but it's pretty much only whenever you use your buff skills. Everyone gets a basic stat improvement, right? Merlin's is okay. Like most of these, honestly, the only ones that I'd really say I've seen like a massive improvement for would be Festival Gotha, Brunhild, obviously Magelda for the actual farming of the bird, and then maybe Arthur is helpful as well. Like so there's some solid relics in here, and some very good ones. And Barnes obviously is great for when Barn was broken, and it's still very good if you want to have Barn as a backline unit, but he's kind of been superseded. So in terms of like overall what I think the bird is definitely very worth farming. It's something that, once you have a handful of them, you'll kind of want to farm them, probably become a lot less. And again, luckily due to these two heroes, it's become a lot more kind of, you can just invest in these units and then just maybe invest in one more, and you're pretty much at where you need to be for this. So that's where actually our next contestant, so to speak, actually beats the bird is the deer. Now, there's definitely some cons to the deer, which I'll get to, but the cool thing about the deer is because you pretty much, you need your Demonic Beast specific hero for this, which is Yorm, But because it's got a color wheel, you can pretty much invest in any red units you like, or any blue units you like, right? Or any ones that are good for PvE. So you can actually get started on this one a lot earlier than potentially if you're just starting fresh from the bird, right? So like if I'm building up and for some reason I have no idea about demonic beasts and I don't even think about it, and then I go, okay, I can actually do them now, and I have a look, unless I have kind of a few specific heroes here built up, I can't really attempt it because you need like the heavy damage for some of the phases and the taunts and the death damage, right? Whereas for the deer, as long as I've got some invested blue, green, and red units, I can kind of have a go at it, right? So that's where I think the deer is definitely better. And I think that's where it kind of has the advantage in that regard. So it's probably a little bit easier to actually just pick up and go. And honestly, with the free deer relic, I'm really hoping you guys got Yorm's relic. And if you don't, like this is probably the best, like in combination with her passive, the deer is just insanely easy now. Like once you guys get a rotation down, it does have an annoying, it has basically the same unique as Overcomes Crisis at the end of the fight at floor 3, which is just permanent, which is annoying, but once you have a setup and a plan for it, it's very easy to kind of walk your way through. Well, very easy, but I can pretty much switch my brain off and just do it, right? So that's definitely where, again, the deer has the advantage, is that the Holy Relic from Magelda on the bird is fantastic, but the combination of this, her passive plus her Holy Relic, when it ranks up skills, I think it's the most powerful, like she's the most influential character, right, in any piece of content, I think, personally. I'm sure you guys will probably have a disagreement, or Slash can probably prove me wrong in the comments below, but that's what I think, just because she just makes this walk in the park, right? So that's where I think the deer has it over the bird, is just the flexibility and kind of once you're at a certain point, how easy it does become. There's still times where if I get very unlucky with my passives or, the way my cards fall and stuff in bird, I can't do it. 99 times out of 100, even if I get really unlucky with RNG on terms of different cards and stuff, I can still either brute force my way through, or I might have to just quickly reset one floor. So that's the positives of the deer. The downsides of the deer, again, is to do with color wheel. It's a blessing and a curse. Because you're so reliant on this color wheel in certain stages, it basically means that if you don't get the right cards in the color wheel, it can really stuff up your run. Like I said, for me, I can generally brute force my way through most of it, regardless of the color wheel. There's a certain few points where you still need to obviously make sure you abide by it, otherwise you can't progress in the game, in the run. But yeah, that's probably the only annoying thing, is when you just get a handful of like green cards when you just need a red card. That's very frustrating. It's got nothing to do with obviously how you play the game. It's all to do with just your pure RNG. So that can be very, very frustrating about the deer as well. So like I said, I definitely think that these two are more lower rank friendly, obviously, than these two. And we'll get into these two very shortly. But that's kind of the comparison. So I think bird and deer I'd kind of put in the same kind of boat, I would say, in the sense that, even if you're kind of earlier on in the game, you will be able to, still be able to do it as long as you get to kind of like level 90, fully super awakened with UR gear. You can kind of get away with doing it. Even if you don't have massive investments in cosmetics or anything like that, you'll still be able to, do a decent run, kind of fumble your way through and then get the Holy Relics, and then be able to bully your way through the rest. So I would say that the bird and the deer kind of are grouped in a similar category in terms of like the easier demonic beasts, right? Just because like I said, excuse me, like I said, it doesn't really, like, your total CC doesn't really matter, and your constellations and stuff don't really matter. As long as you get to level 90, fully super awakened, you'll be able to jump in and do them, right? In terms of comparisons in Holy Relics, obviously there's more in the bird than there is in the deer, by about double, right? So it's hard to kind of compare. It also depends on obviously what team and what you're trying to build, right? In terms of most helpful, These the goddess race relics are incredibly helpful, just because they're so common. Like goddess teams so commonly used in terms of getting high points, or even in PvP. It's dropped off now, but even in PvP, right? Like, you'd be surprised how often this ultimate move disable actually comes in help with Tarmiel. This increase in basic stats is great. This increase in counter damage is good for like Tower of Trials and stuff like that. This HP boost and bonus is great for boss points. It's great for the dogs, which we'll get to in a second. This relic is just super overpowered. Tarmiel's is not bad. Even Margaret's is pretty decent. Ludo's is great if you're got a built Ludo, right, and you want to engage as passive. So in between the comparison, like, I honestly would say, and this might be super controversial, but I actually think I prefer the Deer's the Holy Relics. And I'll break down the rest of them as we go. But that's kind of, so that would be like how I would kind of judge the initial two, right? They're the ones that are in the kind of easier bucket, right? Now we jump into Skull and Hardy. Now, Skull and Hardy, up until recently, was one that I pretty much would just put in the too hard basket, unless you're very invested in a lot of heroes. You've been playing the game for a while. Maybe you've got 7 or 8 mil box CC or above. Whereas now with the Holy Relic of our girl Thonar, it does make it easier. And obviously we all just got a Holy Relic for free, and I'm hoping you guys picked Thonar. I know I said in my previous videos that I was umming and ahhing about Thonar versus King, but I definitely think Thonar was the way to go. So I hope you guys all did get Thonar, and if not, well, we can hope that you guys get it, in terms of you're just gonna have to keep farming the dogs until you do get it, right? So the dogs is definitely in the harder category of demonic beasts. They just do a lot of damage. There's a lot of debuffs that happen to you, and I've invested in these heroes more than I have invested in any of the heroes that I use for the deer or the bird. And I still, I can get there, but it's still a bit of a struggle, right? It's not clean runs. Like the bird and the deer, I can pretty much just switch my brain off and just do it. Whereas the dogs, there's still a bit of RNG. The passives in this hit a lot harder. You've got to make sure you get the right cards, the right passives. You've got to use the right team. And there are obviously a couple of different teams for this, but a lot of them actually are pretty heavily box CC reliant, which is something, again, that I haven't really come across in this game up until this kind of point, is because, for example, if you are going to use, let's say, the King team, right? And again, I'll do a video on this where I cover all the different teams. But basically, where is King? There he is. The idea is you put a barrier up for King, right? And my King is full free-to-play maxed. He's only 4 out of 6, but I've got full cosmetics for all of him, right? I've only got one weapon. I've got the Holy Relic. And still, I don't really do enough damage to cover what I need to cover, right? In terms of having that shield strong enough to, proc Barnes passive and get through the boss, right? So I've kind of had to resort to, as you guys can see, this is the team that I've been using, right? So this is the team that I've kind of resorted to. So in terms of, difficulties, definitely further up there in terms of difficulty, and will require you to have a higher box CC, cosmetics invested in, and, using the right heroes, getting the right passives, all that kind of stuff. Whereas this, once you kind of get to level 90, level 100, fully super awakened UR gear, you can kind of just get stuck in and start doing it, right? Obviously, Holy Relics dependent, but once you get the Holy Relics, this kind of makes this a walk in the park. Even with Holy Relics here, this is still a difficult boss. In terms of the Holy Relics that you do get, they're pretty cool. Skadi's is pretty nice. Ragnarok Dian's is fantastic for, obviously, PvP. Backline Zeldris is fantastic. Chandler is fantastic. But these are fantastic relics, but they're more, honestly, they're all PvP based. Skadi's not, obviously, you can use Skadi's all the time. King's not, and Thonar's specifically for the relic. But, if I was doing, Chandler's, Zeldris's, Giants, apart from Dian's, is pretty much not really needed or existent. And obviously there's a lot less, right? There's a lot less relics than the other one. But, this just means that these ones are a lot more hyper specific, and they're a lot more coveted, of course, right, because they're harder to get, but they're just not quite there in terms of like the flexibility that all of these ones offer, right? Like for these ones, you do have Summer Merlins, so if you want to have a Summer Merlin team, you can. You've got Megelders, you've got another PvP for Ragnarok, you've got Brunhild, which is great for PvE, you've got Festival Gotha, which is great across the board, right? Everyone uses Gotha a lot, the other Gotha a lot, you've got Purgatory Barns, so like, and then this is obviously all the goddesses and the fairies, and again, I'm being slightly harsh, just because there's obviously less, so it's easier to say that they have less options, right? But I'm also taking into consideration like how much harder these bosses are than these two. So I think Skull and Hardy's good, and I'm obviously working my way through them myself. But in terms of like overall cost-benefit ratio, unless you're at this point in the game where you can easily farm the bird and the deer, I don't know how much I'd recommend focusing on Skull and Hardy just yet. And then that's kind of my initial thoughts on Skull and Hardy. Again, I'll do a full guide and I'll explain what like holy relics I recommend and what ones I'm obviously getting and stuff as well. I mean, you guys can see it here, but yeah, so that's kind of my thoughts, I suppose, on Skull and Hardy. And then finally, of course, we do have the new snake boss, right? And then you've got 3 holy relics at the moment. So this one is a pretty easy and straightforward conversation to have. It's pretty much, this is in a league of its own. There's no hero designed for it yet. There's no holy relic for that hero that's designed for it. You pretty much need to be a whale or be, 10 million box CC plus, with all heroes fully cosmeticsed out, fully invested in, and get lucky with RNG to even attempt investing in this and attempt going for this. So this isn't a league of its own at the moment in terms of it's only just come out. It's just not worth your time. It's just straight up not worth it. I would only even consider like having a look at this. Like I said, if I had 10 mil box CC, I'd finished all the holy relics on all of the other ones. And even then, I'd probably still wait for the hero specific for this boss to come out, right? Which is the one that we're all kind of waiting for. So I suppose I'd have like 3 categories here. I'd have the bird and the deer, obviously being the oldest demonic beasts in a kind of, you can do it pretty comfortably once you get UR gear at level 90, level 100 SA 6, right? They both have their pros and cons, but I would probably lean more towards the deer being slightly better in terms of just relics and overall gameplay. I know that might be a bit of a controversial opinion, but I find that the deer is just easier and I get a little bit more enjoyment playing the deer. Maybe it's just the way that the passives work and the way his mechanic works, so the deer's mechanic works, but I'd probably say the deer is better than the bird, just for bang for your buck. And obviously, you can finish these faster than you can finish the other ones, so it's a bit more completionisty. I definitely recommend getting the must-haves from the bird first, because that's really going to help, like, your Brunhilds of the world, and if you've got Festival Gotha, and, so definitely, like, Brunhilds is up there, especially if you're going to use her in the deer. But yeah, I prefer the deer. I'll be honest, I prefer the deer, and I do like having the goddess holy relics. So these two are in the category of its own, and if I had to pick, I would pick the deer. Skull and Hardy is in the hard basket. It's in the basket of, like, if you've finished all of these and you can start farming this effectively, then do it. But for example, for me, I don't even really bother farming this. I pretty much just wait for the weeklies. What I'm going to do going forward is wait for the weeklies, get my weeklies done on this, and then just go back to farming these until I've completed these, and then I'll have a go at it. So this is in the hard and wouldn't recommend farming unless you're very confident with it and comfortable with it. Like I said, it's still on the slightly harder side, where these are on the kind of like switch your brain off and just go for it kind of thing, right? So this is the more bang for your buck, which is the purpose of this video. And then obviously finally the snake is just stay the heck away from. So, I mean, like I said, I hope that video was helpful, guys, and gave you a bit of insight of like what I recommend in terms of your priorities for the demonic beasts. Happy to do like a video on like ranking all the different holy relics and stuff if you guys want as well, but I thought this was a good video just to kind of touch on what I recommend as a high level and how I recommend going about these. So one more time for those playing at home, have fun with these, farm these until you basically completed them. Do your weeklies on these if you've got a team built up for it, and then just ignore this basically entirely. So Like I said, bit of a ramble video, but I hope that makes sense and I hope that was helpful for you guys. Just from my experience, that's obviously what I recommend. So hope you guys are enjoying the current Valentine's Day event, and as always, I will catch you guys in the next one.